This is part 1 in the Craftsman Emerson 150 drill press rebuild series. In this video, we'll be introducing you to this drill press and then get into the disassembly. Hello everyone, I'm Jeff and welcome to my shop. We got a lot to cover, so let's get to it. This is a Craftsman Emerson 15.5-inch drill press 150 series. Or when we're talking about Emersons, we call this an Emerson Generation 1. And this is what 60 years of neglect looks like. You can see all the pitting on this sucker. So this is model number 11324511. And they were produced by the Emerson Corporation from 1964 through 1966. So for 3 years. They made a benchtop version, and then they made the floor standing version. And at the same time, in 1964, there was this transition between King Sealy and Emerson supplying the drill presses. So there are the exact same drill presses out there that have a prefix of 103 for King Sealy versus this one, which has a prefix of 113 for Emerson. But the rest of them are exactly the same. So you can definitely see this one's in rough shape, and it was partially disassembled when I got it. So here's the hub and pinion and spring. We'll get back to that motor in a second. This is some more parts that were taken off of it. That's your Quill lock. There's your Quill and spindle, nicely rusted together with a drill bit stuck in the chuck. This is the motor that was on this drill press. I can't for the life of me figure out why people kept putting 3450, 3460 RPM motors on drill presses, because that's way too fast. And the owner's manual clearly says you need a 1750 or a 1725, which is what this one is. And this is a period correct motor. So we'll be using this motor. And it runs now, so we'll just be rebuilding it. That thing, I don't know, I'm probably tossing that in the trash. But we got our work cut out for us. I don't know if I'm going to be able to save this thing, but we will give it our best shot. So like I said, this drill press was already partially disassembled. And if you want to see how to completely disassemble one from the very beginning with everything in it, I'll put a link to another video here, and that'll take you through. But basically the 100s and the 150s are very similar in how they're designed and how they go together and the parts and stuff like that. So to get things started, we're going to go ahead and spray a bunch of PB Blaster at all these various joints. This is definitely the worst rusted drill press I've ever had to work on. So whether or not we can save it is really going to depend on how well it cleans up. And the bolt that's facing the camera for the motor mount is broken off in the head. So we can't even remove the motor mount as it is right now. We'll go ahead and take off that motor mount stud. It's got a little washer on it that you can spin loose, and then you can unscrew the stud out of the head casting. This is one of the big differences between a 100 and a 150. The 150s have a tilting motor mount. That makes changing the belts easier. This stud will hold that motor mount vertical so that it doesn't rattle. Next, we'll go ahead and remove the locking clamp that's at the bottom of the motor mount that the stud locks into. So we'll go ahead and knock out the lock and the um, sleeve for the Quill lock. I'm just using an ice pick to kind of tap on that, knock it out of there. It came out easier than I thought it would. And then this side. I'm not going to do a whole lot of speed ramping in this video because I want to show the whole process in case somebody has a drill press where a part is frozen in or stuck in there, rusted in, and you can't figure out how to get it out. So next, we'll go ahead and get the head lock out. There's your lock handle and screw. And those are really, really rusted in there. So I'm going to try to put the screw back into the nut side and pull on it and see if I can get it out of there. But it does not want to move. So really the best thing for rust is heat. And this is just a MAP gas torch that I'm using. I'm going to heat up the areas where the lock and the sleeve engage inside the head casting and right at where they meet the column on the inside. And there's a ton of old grease and sawdust and all kinds of stuff on the inside of this thing. So when I stick that torch in there, you're going to see a bunch of flames come out of there, but it's not a big deal. So I'm going to again use that same ice pick and my hammer. I'm using an ice pick because it's small enough that when I stick it through the hole on the other side, I can tilt it so that it's hitting the rim of the back side of this. This is actually the nut side, but the back side of it. See if we can get some movement out of that. Now, some of these, the lock sleeve and the lock nut that's in there right now, some of them are made out of hardened steel, and some of them are made out of cast Zamak. And the Zamak ones tend to deteriorate over time. Zamak is kind of like an aluminum, so they can get warped and stuff, and they're really not the best quality. The hardened steel ones are the best. We got it moving. So it should go without saying that if you're messing with a torch and you've heated these parts up, don't go grabbing them with your hands because you won't do that twice. That's a self-correcting error. So now we're just heating up the other one on the other side of the head, which will be the sleeve. And then we'll be driving it out as well. So I'm using a brass rod now. And it's coming out. There it goes. All right, so I can get the motor mount off, and the way I'm going to do this is the side that's not facing the camera, the bolt in that side was not broken off, so I was able to get that bolt out. But this side, obviously, we can't move the pin that's inside the head casting right now because there's a bolt in there holding it in place. So there are roll pins that connect the tilting part of that to the two rods that go inside the head casting. And I'm just going to knock out that roll pin on the side facing the camera here. And then we should be able to remove the motor mount. We're doing this because we need to get to the column. We need to be able to see that column a little better because that head casting is rusted on that column. So obviously, if you have this drill press and you can get the two mounting screws out, then you don't need to do this part here, but this is how I'm getting it out. So now I'm just going to pull on that motor mount and get the rod to come out on the left side as I'm facing it, like so. There we go. And that roll pin just fell. So here we are on the back side of the head casting, and you can see the column. And you've got basically two bores, one at the top that I'm using the torch on the underside of it, and one near the bottom of the head casting. And we're just going to heat these two bore areas up. And I'm not going to even mess with, you can see that the spindle pulley assembly is still inside the head casting. I'm not going to even mess with trying to get that out right now because the two holes that have the machine screws that come in from the sides and hold that assembly in the head casting, those holes have got a ton of dirt and stuff in them. I can't tell if there's any screws in there or if the heads are broken off or stripped out or anything like that. So it'll be easier to work with the head once we've got it off of the column. If you look closely, especially at that top bore, you can see kind of in the center, there's a seam there. And if you end up cracking a head casting, it usually cracks on that seam. So we've got to be careful. I mean, it's cast iron. You can beat on it pretty good. I mean, most of your vices are made out of cast iron, but at the same time, we don't want to crack it or break it. So we'll be mindful to not cause that to crack. So what I've done here is I've stacked up a bunch of 2x4s on the table, and the table is completely frozen as well. And it's locked down, so it's not going anywhere. And then I'm going to use a bottle jack with a 2x4 on top of it. And I've got that standing off of the column by, I don't know, 2 or 3 inches. I don't want to put it right up against the column. I want it to be a little bit off of the column so that it lifts the head straight up. But I don't want it so far towards the front of the head that it causes the head to tilt. And we're just going to slowly lift the head up and see if it moves. I've had them before where they'll stick, and then they'll pop and come loose. But this one actually moved pretty decently once we got that bottle jack under it. So we are out of the top bore now, but we're still on that bottom bore. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the bottle jack out of the way. I'm not worried about that head sliding down at all because the column is so pitted and covered in rust. So what I am going to do is I'm going to put a column collar on there. This is just a pipe collar that I got from Lowe's or Home Depot. I don't remember. Your column is 2 3/4 of an inch on the outside diameter, so you just need a pipe collar that's going to work for that. We're going to tighten that down, and that will keep the head from falling down if it were to slide down the column. So I'm going to place that collar about right where the bottom of the head would be when the head had not moved any. And we may have to move it a little bit later, but for now it'll do what it needs to do. So I'm going to get the column to, or the head to ride back on the column where it was originally at. And then I've got an old piece of belt from one of my belt sanders. And I'm just going to clean up that column a little bit. So that once we get this head moving, it will slide the rest of the way and not get hung up. It may help to spray a little bit of WD-40 on there and then hit it with the belt, but yeah. And we're lucky in that the head is actually loose enough that I can rotate it on the column. So what we're going to do is after we get done with sanding that side, we're going to rotate the head and do the other side of the column. And I don't know what grit this is, but it really doesn't matter. The rust that's on that column is just crazy. I mean, I could be doing this with 80 grit sandpaper and it wouldn't matter. We'll be cleaning the column up, hopefully, in the future, anyways. So, all we're trying to do is smooth out all that crud on there so that this thing will slide. So, WD-40. And we'll rotate it. Hit it with the WD-40 on this side. All right. So we'll give it a shot. And there we go. And that's how you get a head off of a stuck column. So next, we're just moving that column collar down below the table. Because the table is the next thing we're going to be getting off of here. All right, so let's loosen up that lock handle and get it out of there. And then we'll apply the heat. This is why you don't leave a drill press in an open barn on a dirt floor. All right, so ice pick and hammer, and we're able to knock the lock out, and then the sleeve from the other side with the brass rod. And then since we're going to slide that table all the way up the column, we've got to clean up the column a little bit. So the same thing we did for the head. I feel like I'm doing one of those 1920s exercise belt machine things. Other than the rust and stuff, as far as I can tell, the table on this thing looks like it's in pretty good condition. I don't see any holes drilled in it or arc of shame or anything like that. So we'll see more once we get it cleaned up. But yeah. So these Emerson drill presses originally came with kind of a dark charcoal color was the paint on these. Unlike the gray that was used on the early King Sealies. And I don't think I've ever seen an Emerson in the Power Bronze either. So all the Emersons that I've really seen have been that charcoal gray, and it's darker than, like, you can see my two Emerson drill presses there on the left side of the screen, and it's a darker gray than those. It's more of a charcoal, like I said. Of course, it's covered in rust right now, so you can't really tell. So we're going to move this collar down about an inch so that we can apply heat directly under where the table is meeting the column. And I can just tell you from doing this kind of stuff that heat is going to be your fastest way to get this stuff apart. Before I was ever willing to try a torch on any of this stuff, I would sit there and beat it with a rubber mallet until I was blue in the face and wouldn't get anything to move. And all of my mechanic friends were like, dude, just hit it with a torch. Hit it with a torch. Or as the mechanics call it, the blue wrench. And yep, that definitely does the trick, no doubt about it. So inside the table, there are two bores, one at the top and one at the bottom. We just need to apply the proper amount of heat to those two bores. Man, there are motorcycles driving all around my house today. All right, let's see what we got. Doesn't really want to do anything. Let's whack it with a mallet. So this is a rubber dead blow hammer. So we've got movement. I think we can get it off of there. Let's see how it comes up. It's still really hot. I'm trying not to grab onto it there. And if you've got any play, it'll get bound up like it is right now. You've got to kind of wiggle it, get it in that sweet spot. And then you should be able to get it off of there. Come on. There we go. All right, we can get that column collar out of here. And next, we're going to remove the base. So the base has a lock screw. And that screw is pushing on a shoe, a lock shoe on the inside of the base that then pushes on the column. So we'll get that screw out of there. we go. So when you've got a seized base on a column, this is the best method that I've come up with. So the distance from the column to the end of the base or the front of the base is about 16 inches. So you need something that's about 16 inches to rest the column on. And then you're going to use heat, and you're going to use a hammer, and you're going to use a big piece of steel. And I'm going to point out some things here with this column and the bottom of the base here in a second. But we're just going to apply a bunch of heat. Now, right now, that column is protruding through the base towards the camera about an eighth of an inch, eighth to a quarter of an inch, which means the column was actually resting on the ground, which is not what you want. It contributes to the rust. So what I've got is, I think this is like an 1.5 inch piece of steel stock. And since that column is protruding past the end of the base, we can smack the column edge with this piece of bar. And I'm using, I think it's like a 10-pound sledge type hammer. I'm not sure what you call it. Start getting that to move. So let's talk about this. There are 3 little rests right there, and those are what you want resting on the ground. The column, which is right there, you want it to actually be flush with the rounded part of the opening, not with those 3 protrusions. But we're going to rest this rod or this piece of bar stock on the column, but not on the base. And we're just going to tap that column into the base. Once it starts to move inside, it'll be easier to rest on the column and not worry about chipping the edge of the base bore. Probably one of the important things here is that that column needs to be pretty much level. So that's why I put those 2x4s under it. And as we work our way around it, it's already moving. I've already moved it probably 3/16 to 1/2 inch. You'll start to see it a little better here in a minute. But this is all done in real time. So you're seeing that this takes me, I don't know, 5-10 minutes total to get this thing out of here. And that torch that I use, I don't know, they're probably $20 and $20 for the map gas. So we're just going to shoot some WD-40 inside that bolt hole, that screw hole that we pulled the screw out of, and let it seep around the shoe that's in there, the lock shoe, and down onto the column. Because inside the base, there's actually 3 bores. There's this bore on the bottom, there's a bore at the top, and then there's one in the middle. We need to get the column past the second bore. You can see how far it's already traveled. Kind of doing this from feel because I can't see inside there while I'm standing above it. I just want to make sure we're past that second bore before we stop. We're on the second bore. We're just not clear of it yet. And there may be another way to do it, but this idea or this method was recommended to me by Frank Lee, and it's my go-to method to get a base off of a stuck column. I've never had it not work. So now that we're clear of that second bore, we're going to check and see if we can turn the column at all. And if we can, there we go. Then we're going to go ahead and stand it up and try to twist that column out of there. We'll get it here in a second. I'm twisting and lifting at the same time. And I guess a little bit of jiggling as well. But there it is. And the last thing we're going to do is we're going to knock that shoe, the lock shoe, out of the base. That is going to wrap up this video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like and subscribe. I have no idea how many videos it's going to take to rebuild this drill press, but we'll give it our best. As always, I appreciate the support, and I will see you next time.